Hello, welcome to SEAS Backstage. This is your all-access pass to everything you need to know to design, produce, and inspire your next event. I'm your host, Troy Peters, Chief Experience Officer here at SEAS Productions, to guide you through the world of live event production. Remember to subscribe to the podcast so you too can get backstage. On today's podcast, we're joined by our President and CEO, Zack Grant, and we're going to talk about risk mitigation and how to minimize impacts of the unknown on your live event.
Yeah, that's a big one. And I think the first thing here is that knowing going into any event, things are going to go wrong. Whether or not you see them, things are going to go wrong. There's so many pieces of gear, people, information, emails, texts, and then your client, right? Your client, all the unknown factors that happen there, like maybe they go off script, maybe a presenter doesn't show up, a flight cancels. Point is, there's literally millions of things, infinite things that can go wrong. Some of them are going to go wrong. And how do you prepare to minimize the impact they have on your event?
Yep, absolutely. I give a talk on show management, stage management, how to, and part of that talk is mitigating risk. And we talk about the Academy Awards where Warren Beatty read the wrong name. I mean, that's a person, that's people. You know, it's as much about the gear, but it's also about the operators or the people on stage and all those things. You've got to take all that into effect. Mariah Carey's microphone failing on New Year's Eve, or in 2013 when the power went out for the Super Bowl. So what did they do? They cut to commercial. They cut to a stage. So what do you do in those situations? And it's even more prevalent now because of live streaming or anything you're doing virtually, where you've got to have, you can't just have dead air, right?
Right.
Back in the olden days, they used to put up a slide that said, "We're experiencing technical difficulties.
Yeah.
We will be right back." Even for studio productions like ABC, NBC, CBS would do that. And so we always have to have that in the back of our mind and have those uncomfortable what-if conversations when you're looking at mitigating risk.
I think a lot of the time people forget that behind the scenes, it's still people making it happen, right? That person might have something going on personally, right? Maybe they didn't get enough sleep, or I don't know, like worst case, they had some personal issue going on. They might not be on their A game that day, right?
Sure.
So as good as everybody could be, and you know, probably the number one thing we'll talk about later is making sure you get the right crew, right? But even the right crew sometimes makes a mistake. You still have people that have to do the work. So the biggest productions, the best companies, they all still make mistakes. You know, it happens. So
the flip side of that personnel coin is that if you've got the right person and it goes south, that person will fix it.
That's the key, right? It's not whether or not things are going to happen. It's picking the company that knows how to handle it when things do go wrong, right? You need to pick someone with experience that's good and quick at troubleshooting.
So maybe we start with a couple examples of maybe some shows that we've had in the past that have had some challenges. I can think of one right out of the gate where we had a CEO that was notorious for not showing up on time. We did this event several times, and by the third time we did it, we're like, we got to come up with a plan because doors open at 9. CEO is supposed to be on stage at 9:30, and it's 9:45 every time, and nothing's happening, and everybody's sitting in the room twiddling their thumbs. So simply, we just added trivia slides. We had slides that were engaging for the crowd. 1,000 people in a ballroom that were able to watch that and at least do something while they're waiting for the show to really start.
Yeah.
So, and that's a bit of a soft problem, right? When you're dealing with humans. That's not a technical problem. We'll get more into that. I have another story to share about that. But why don't you share a story?
Yeah. So I've got a little bit of a different one. You ever done a show where you knew it was going to be challenging to begin with at the outset?
I know the show you're talking about. Where a client calls them like, "We're already having problems. Can you help us have less problems?" Kind of that scenario.
Super last minute. And so we had one of those last year. Huge show occurring in 9 cities all simultaneously. It wasn't until like the week before that we knew we were actually doing this thing.
Wow, so huge logistically. That's a huge lift, right?
Right, because we got to book. I think the total crew on this show was like 60 or 70 people. Crews of, and really it probably should have been more, but we were working with their teams that they were supplying local labor as well. So anyway, huge challenge. I felt like it was the right thing to do to take this on to help them out. But we went into it knowing basically there were going to be issues on site that we were going to have to problem solve. And we just kind of had all hands available to deal with those issues as they popped up. We had things like one that I remember specifically is they needed a fiber optic cable to run all these like super long runs of cable across basically like these parks that were like football fields.
Right.
And it wasn't available. And the bids I were getting were crazy, if you could even find it. So we basically ended up finding someone that had it, like the manufacturer of it, overnighting it on site to the crews on site. And there were things like that. But we lined up all of our vendors in the areas local when we needed things, and we made sure everybody had like cards that they could make purchases, even the freelancers on site, and we just had like a good game plan going into it. And at the end of the day, like despite the issues, I think that was a success. You know?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. That's great. And I like the idea of basically what you're doing by handing out credit cards to even the freelancers, you're empowering people to solve problems.
Yeah.
You're going into the situation going, we think we've got you covered, but this is your backup plan. So having a backup plan. So
Huge.
let's go right into gear. When we talk about gear, there's a lot of times where it's less of a problem now that we're looking at laser projectors being kind of the standard. But when we were dealing with 3-chip DLP projectors, standard 30K projectors and whatnot for a large show, you would double stack them.
Yeah.
And basically have them both running at the same time, because something could happen where the power is cut to one of those projectors, or the signal fails, or I've seen where a forklift is driven right across of an SDI cable and that's it, no signal, but the other projector is up and running.
Right.
So the audience might notice a slight change in intensity of but you really don't see it. Like as a tech, we probably see it, but the audience isn't going to notice.
Every time something goes wrong, like my heart drops, no matter how minor it is. And that's the thing with problems. Like there's going to be a lot of stuff. 99% of the time, nobody even knows about it except for you when you watch it back and you're like, oh yeah, that was horrible.
But that's what we're doing, right? We're having two laptops running
exactly.
your PowerPoint presentation in case one laptop crashes or decides to do a reboot for updates, right?
Yes.
Thank you, Microsoft, for those updates that always happen. I love when they happen,
keep
but
the internet off when you're on site.
There
That's
you go.
Never a good thing.
Very good. But yeah, the same thing. When I'm sitting at front of house or, at the back of the room while the team's running the show and I watch that CEO take the stage for the first time, I swear my heart stops until I hear the voice come over the PA. And then I'm like, all right, we're off and running.
I know.
Right?
I'm like, I know I need to like stay positive, but man, I am a warrior. So I actually most of the time don't go on site anymore for that reason. It's like not good for my health.
Yeah. I totally agree.
Sounds so funny being the one to run the company, but it's true.
Yeah.
Some people are just, they're rock stars on site. My dad was always that way. It was like, no matter what happened on site, it never fazed him. Like there was, I don't know if I told you the story. There was a show way back. We used to do all of the shows at SeaWorld. They had a stage at the entrance there where bands would play all the time.
Yep.
And they built like this little wooden closet where they wanted the amp racks and the power distro to live. And I was young. I was probably 13, 14. I used to go to this thing because they give away free sandwiches in the band trailer, and I would walk back there and steal the sandwiches.
Awesome.
I don't know. That's what I look forward to. Whatever. It's weird. But one of those shows, the cam was not. It got hot and literally caught fire. Literally caught fire in the closet.
Wow.
And my dad went in and he reached in and he yanked it out. Which don't do that. That's a good way to get yourself killed. But even in that situation, he made it happen. The show never stopped.
Still kept going.
It kept going.
No kidding.
And he just. That was like the most extreme example of something I could think of, but it takes those kind of people that they stay level-headed in the moment, no matter what's going on, and you need those. Those guys are rock stars.
Absolutely. And I think sort of the next sort of piece is the planning side and sort of how you're working with a budget or you're working with time constraints. So I can think of another example. We had an awards banquet. It was first thing in the morning in a hotel where there was an event that ended at like 10 o'clock the night before, and we needed to come in that morning. It was
all night
Chamber of Commerce thing, and it was a huge awards where it was like you had to play a video, a nomination video, and then an awards video, and then the awardee one, and then slides. So there's all these moving parts. And so what we did was we engineered the entire room with our with our playback devices, our laptops, and everything. In a boardroom just like this, we set up everything that was going to go to site, loaded everything on it, ran through everything, made sure everything worked, made sure we had backups ready to go, packed it up, put it on the truck. A crew came in at midnight, loaded, 6 a.m.
Yeah.
Everything we had already tested. And again, testing is one of those key things. Tested, make sure that things were speaking to each other. We were able to go through that show, and so it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know who does a really good job of that kind of stuff is the companies that do a lot of touring, right? Because they're in and out of a venue sometimes in like less than 8 hours. Like
Yeah.
that's got to fly.
Yep.
And you know, a lot of companies that do ballroom gigs like us, like, yeah, maybe you have preload days and whatever, but there are instances where, yeah, we will pull out all the gear, we'll make all of our cable looms, we'll label the trusses, we'll hang the, you know, to get all that done before we show up on site.
Yep.
So anyway, talking about mitigating risk, I want to get into some of the stuff, and it's not always feasible to do all of the things for one reason or another. Maybe it's budget.
Right.
Maybe there's no space for this thing. We can't have this many people on the crew because someone else is running something else. So, like, let's get into some of the specifics that starting, you know, would increase the likelihood, I think, that something is going to go wrong. And then we can talk about how, you know, we try not to let those things happen.
Right.
First one on my mind is budget, right? So making sure that the ask for what you need for your event is the budget is suited for that, I guess, is the best way to put it, right?
Yep.
You're not asking for way more than your budget is permitting. Being realistic with that, especially now, you know, as we know in like California, costs have increased and across the country really, but like, so that's the first one. I don't know.
And
How do you feel about that one?
I think, yeah. So there's always like the, you know, the paraphrase of, you know, there's two ways to do anything.
Yeah,
right?
of
So,
course.
that's a great. So sometimes the sort of a plan would be to duplicate all the equipment, like we talked about, having a second projector or something. But exactly, if that's not in the budget, then we need to have a conversation. And a lot of the times we'll discount that second projector a little bit because it's a backup. For your security and our security, but so we can share some of that cost. But sometimes there's just a different way to think about it. So if you can't have a video playback machine and a second video playback machine, so if one dies for whatever reason, embed that video into a PowerPoint. Maybe it's in 2 PowerPoints. And again, those laptops are probably going to be cheaper than a full-on MacBook or a Mac Pro that's, you know, playing that device. So there's ways to work around that. Another thing is to you know, if you've got a panel that's up on stage and you're worried, so we've done a lot of events in Washington, D.C., and so if the president's motorcade's going by, they squelch all the radio signals in the area. So a lot of the times we'll have wired mics sitting right next to this, right next to it. It's not as pretty.
No,
but it's
good to have.
But it's cheap. It's an eighth the price of a wireless microphone, right? So rather than having dual wireless microphones, have a wired one at $20 instead of $120 or whatever that is, and then be able to. That's your backup, right?
Yeah.
So there's ways to do that.
I got a couple thoughts on it. First of all, if you're working with like the right vendor, you know, who knows what they're doing, they're going to know the areas that they can cut back, and it's not going to, you know, sacrifice the quality of the show, right? So that's the first thing. Make sure that they understand what you're trying to accomplish, right?
And having an educated, just to go back to that audio thing, what you just said made me think of this, having an educated audio engineer that is going to show up even before they leave to the venue or travel to that city, that is already going to pull all what the open frequencies are for that city, which they can do. But not a lot of companies have that knowledge.
You know, that's a funny one, the wireless too, though, because you can go to Shure and register the frequencies. The problem becomes enforcing them. So really the best way to deal with wireless is they've now got systems like Axient Digital, which will in milliseconds change the frequency if you take a hit. And so one thing we'll do on the big shows is we'll put that kind of wireless on what we call the money channels, right? Where if it fails, it's a huge problem, right? If you got the president on stage, it can't fail. So there is technology out there. Of course, that costs more
expensive. So
it's
what
more
we're
expensive.
talking about budget.
Yeah. So what I want to get to basically is, I think my advice for get this fuzz off my mic.
That's an easy problem to mitigate right there.
Oh yeah.
Fuzz mitigation.
Yeah. What I think the advice I have for clients is that you have to figure out, like, where are the most crucial failure points, like, and how much risk are you willing to take? Like, maybe we don't want a backup mic for every mic on stage or a backup monitor, like, because that's not really feasible. If you have a band, you got 12 monitors on stage. We're not going to run 24 because maybe one's going to cut out, right? Yeah. So, but if the generator fails, and I have had this happen on show, your whole event's done, right? So it's figuring out where is the line. What are the things that absolutely cannot fail, and what are the ones where it's probably going to be fine. 99% of the time, I'm willing to take the risk if it's not, because it's not the end of the world if this happens, and we have a backup plan in case something happens.
Yeah.
You got to figure out what those are.
And I think that's the uncomfortable conversation that you need to have. I think we learned that during COVID, that you've got to have those uncomfortable conversations about what happens if the internet falls. Or we were doing a show where Zoom crashed, like the entire Zoom network. So nobody was doing anything for a couple
Streaming
hours.
stuff was just so stressful.
So stressful.
Like, you never know. Like, we had
so much is
backup
outside
plans.
of your control.
Well, yeah, you never know if AT&T is going to show up and decide to, or a car runs into, this
that was
happened
happening.
actually like a month ago. We had a car run into one of the electrical boxes, and we lost internet for like 2 days. So like, for me, that was so stressful, just not being in control of that whole situation. We had backup plans, but I just, it felt out of our hands. At least in the ballroom where you can control the elements, it feels like we can deal with it, you know?
And when you have those conversations about, like, so what is the plan if internet goes out? So do you have a backup cell system that's ready to go? Right. So those are the conversations you've got to have. And I think as we sort of think about the next part of this is that, really being able to get in front, pre-produce, prepare, have those uncomfortable conversations. What if your keynote speaker doesn't make it?
Yeah.
All the way down to, what if your microphone fails?
Right.
What do you do?
And I want to throw in here, any company that's telling you, oh, it's going to be perfect, everything's going to be perfect.
Yep.
Full of shit. Sorry. They're absolutely full of shit.
Yeah.
Even the biggest, best companies, they deal with all this kind of crap.
I say Mariah Carey.
Yeah.
Like, you don't get an event bigger than New York Times Square, right?
Yeah.
Or the Super Bowl where the generator fails.
Yeah.
Mariah Carey's microphone fails, right? Like,
Yep.
it happens. And so it doesn't matter if you're just doing a board meeting with a PowerPoint and a projector and a screen, that projector bulb might die. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Right? So having all those conversations.
Yep. You're talking about pre-producing. So
rehearsals, timelines.
Yeah. Exactly. Rehearsals. That's one of the ones that I feel like it's glossed over all the time, right? When you're in like a same day set show strike, often rehearsal time is limited, if available at all. And if we don't have that and it's a cue heavy show, you're increasing the risk that something's going to get messed up, right?
Yeah.
That's like a huge one that I think you've got to have pretty much every show. And you know what? If you don't, I say wing it. Like, we've done it so many times, we kind of know, like, okay, it'll probably be fine. Right. But, if you've got a really important cue, like we had one recently where it's like someone in the audience is going to stand up and this music has to play at that moment, and then we're going to roll this video. Like, if we're not rehearsing that, like, how is that crew going to know that we need to hit in that order, right? And like having a show caller too. There's
a show flow, calling out things by the minute, right? Sometimes we call that a minute to minute, and it's telling you what's coming up next so that you can be ready. And if something doesn't play, something doesn't happen in the right order, that what the next thing is, maybe you can jump forward, right? It's project management of being able to have a show caller that goes, okay, I know where we need to get to. Yeah. We can come back and we can play that video later. Having somebody that can make the call in the room and that you've empowered to do that because you've done all the pre-pro, you've had those conversations. If that doesn't happen, then let's just do this until we can get back to that.
Right. Yep. Last minute changes.
Oh, last minute changes.
Right. That one is a big one. It seems like to some degree it's inevitable. Basically every show, the slides change at midnight the night before. Yep. And you can do that, but you can't guarantee that presenter on stage. I mean, I don't know if you got strategies to do that, but I think there should be like a cutoff point. I don't know how realistic it is. I've got some clients that are like, well, we want to make sure we get the most current information out there, right? We want to make sure that's good. Yep. Okay, that's fine. But, if we've got a 7 a.m. call and he sends that at midnight or 1 a.m. the night before, like,
and you're trying to download that in a ballroom with maybe internet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
You're not
Spotty
in your
internet.
office.
We didn't pay for the internet package we needed. Plus, we're streaming in other rooms at the same time. Like, it's risky.
Yeah.
It's risky. It'll probably work out because we do it all the time, but it's risky. Yep. And when it doesn't work out, everyone's mad.
Yeah, and I think that the other thing to mitigate against, we want to keep focusing on how you can help mitigate those things happening, is don't send me a PowerPoint presentation that says final, right?
Oh,
The
yeah,
file
yeah.
name with final, because we know it's going to happen again. There's going to be another final. We've all seen that.
Yes.
Please, one of the things you can do right out of the gate, even with a script, with PowerPoint slides, with videos or anything, versioning.
Yeah.
V1, V2, V3, and when you get on site, just say, okay, you've got version 5 of that, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the final one. Final one is version 5.
We need to have a whole thing on content management. It is one of those things that makes or breaks a show, and it's never talked about.
Make sure you come see my talk at Infocom this year, where I talk about content management.
Yeah. Oh,
I've
man.
been speaking about that for 5 years, people.
Yeah.
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 But it's such a critical piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, it's everything.
And we're trying to make all these things fit together.
Can you imagine if the CEO goes on stage and we play the wrong video?
Nope. Don't want to.
Nope.
Don't want to go there.
Haven't had that happen, but man.
Yeah. I mean, there was a time where I was calling, it was probably the first major show that I was calling. And I actually don't think it was even my fault, but we advanced the slide too early for an award winner.
Oh, yeah.
And so for a split second, and I knew the graphics operator hit the button by accident and toggled back really quickly.
Yeah.
But it was up long enough for the CEO of that organization, who I'm really good friends with to this day.
Yeah.
Just gave me the look. And I was like, yeah.
You knew you fucked up.
I did. I knew I fucked up. All right. Let's wrap this up with some tips and tricks. What else we got?
Yeah. Okay. Tips and tricks. So, first one, make sure that your scope of work is in line with your budget. Good way to make sure that you do that is, one, you can ask your vendors, right? We'll tell you, right, if this is too much or too little or whatever. And I would say organize. I guess I got 3 points on that. Ask your vendors if it makes sense for what they're asking for. 2, tell them the things that you absolutely have to have and the things that you can live without. And 3rd, put some budget in there for backup. And that's not just gear, right? It could be an extra person,
Time as well.
Time.
Budget in that. Budgeting is also time, right?
Yes.
Budget some time so you can get together with your team.
Absolutely.
Before you get on site, even when you get on site.
Yeah.
Make sure that that's called out so everybody can have those conversations.
If you run a really tight timeline, it's like everything is in 15-minute increments. Yeah. As soon as one thing doesn't stay on schedule like the whole day.
Yep.
And then you're talking, in California, or if you're working with union meal penalties, OT, double
Get
OT,
expensive fast.
And those are not fun conversations we like to have. So yeah, make sure the budget works. Second one, time. We didn't really talk about time, but that's a huge thing. Basically, I guess we did kind of touch on this. Last minute things are going to be more expensive. You have less supply, less resources. Your vendor has less people, less equipment that they can go find for a decent rate.
Yep.
And so when you come to them last minute for something and you have to have this thing, it's going to be more expensive. If you give them time, and we're not talking years, but like at least a few months before they know what they're doing.
And it's really about giving them the attention to talk about it, the availability to talk about it.
Yeah.
That's the time we need.
Right.
Like, we just need to have the conversation.
Yeah. Going, hey, we have this event next year, hold these dates. We don't know where it is. We don't know what we're doing. And then we don't find out till 2 weeks before. I can't guarantee that whatever the price was in maybe a slow month is going to be exactly the same. That's how time's a factor too. Supply and demand affects it, right? When everybody's busy, there's less supply, prices of everything go up.
Yep.
Content. When should people deliver content to the
So
AV team?
I would always, and that's, I would love to see a preliminary script or the script you had last year or a year, whenever you did the program last. So at least we have a starting place. We can kind of know that, okay, everybody that takes the stage has a stinger, has some sort of walk-on music. There's going to be 3 or 4 presentations. Everybody's, presenting from their own slide deck. All right, that's good to know. By looking at last year's program, if it's going to be similar, that's a first step in the right direction. And then it's really getting a preliminary agenda as soon as you know when your event's falling and just calling out the big things, but then a detailed agenda probably about a month out that's got maybe some things called out about, this video plays there, and then hand that off to our team that will then do things like take a look at the video. Okay, that video runs for exactly 1 minute, 32 seconds.
Yeah.
That's how much time we have. And when we've got that called out on a sheet as well, on a queue to queue, we can see that, okay, if we're having a problem, like a microphone needs to be reset, well, that video is going to run for a minute and a half. So we've got time to quickly swap that out while that's happening backstage, right?
Yeah.
So those things, really having that timeline built out and all that content, well, in a week or two in advance when it gets down to final videos or what we're hoping are finals, we know that things will show up on site.
Yep.
But if we can get a version and all we're doing is replacing it with a new version, we're so far further down the road.
Yeah.
We've already tested the codec, which is how computer or whatever playback system you have reads the file, is installed already because you're going to be getting it from the same source.
Yeah.
So those
getting
things
those
help
things,
us fix those.
getting those things on site, like that's the codec stuff and the that's been an issue sometimes where they'll upload something and the audio is out of phase and just sounds weird, but you don't find out because you just got handed it 10 minutes before it's supposed to play. Yeah. I mean, those are things.
We've had some shows where the marketing department will be on site and they're building the video backstage and then handing it to us, but their system for whatever reason is not syncing because they're not in the office.
Right.
So we've got to fix it. And we can do a delay on the you see the giant mixing console at the back of the room where the audio engineer is. He can add a delay in for that specific video and we can solve it.
Yeah.
But that takes time.
And making sure that the content is formatted correctly too, right? Like most people know to run PowerPoints at 16:9. It's very rare you see a 4:3 presentation anymore. But when you get into LED, now we're talking custom resolutions and you need to make sure that the content's built the right way. That could be a big problem. Anyway, like I said, content management is like a whole thing on its own. We can get in all the finer points there.
Yeah.
Rehearsals, we said, major, right? Set aside time, show day for rehearsals. Make sure, like you said, there's an abundance of time between when things need to happen to account for things not happening on time so we don't run way past when we're supposed to.
And be honest, if you're the event planner or somebody who's responsible for putting this event together and you are worried about, okay, I don't know if we have the right content that you guys are looking for, or I still haven't received from my team what you guys need. Just start having those conversations with us. Tell us like, okay, well, we're on your side. We want to, but being able to let us know, and then we can communicate to the engineers who are going to start getting frustrated at a point that they don't have content yet. So you can at least communicate that.
Communication's
then
key.
Everything's moving forward.
Communication's key. Yeah. That's a major thing. Whether it's good or bad, if you're just letting us know where you're at in the process, it's helpful for us to know what we can and can't expect and to prepare for that, Yeah.
I think we covered it all. This was good. I'm really grateful that we were able to. This was a good one to put together, and I'm grateful we could share this with everybody. Is there anything we missed? Anything?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, last 2 points. Just thinking. I think I already said this. Make sure your budget accounts for spare items.
Yep.
And
if not spare items, workarounds. Right.
Yeah,
like I said earlier in the program, putting a video into a PowerPoint if you can't afford a second playback. Right. All those things.
Last thing I'll say is if you're having a lot of problem on show, like maybe talk to your vendor to see what maybe you can do to help them be more successful to make your event run smoother, right? If you're getting problems every time, maybe there's just a process change that needs to happen. And if you're not sure what that is, ask them,
Yeah, that's a good point. And, we work with a lot of clients that do 1 or 2 shows a year. Keep in mind, we're doing hundreds.
Oh, hundreds.
So we've seen
all types too.
We've seen every different model of what's out there.
Yeah.
We always try to recommend the best, but if you've got a specific situation that you're like, this keeps happening, like the one where, I've never had another show where the CEO just never showed up on day one of his own opening keynote.
Yeah.
But it kept happening.
Interesting.
So we figured out, we did this for another client. Let's do that here.
Yeah.
So
we enjoy sharing information. It's why we're doing this podcast. We want your
solving
event
the problems.
Yeah, and we want your event to be as successful as it can. We do not feel good when things don't go well. So we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that they can go well. And so, just the more dialogue we can have about what those things are, what you're concerned about, what we need from you, it's all going to result in a better experience for your attendees.
Exactly. And that's what we want.
That's all we want.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. This has been SEAS Backstage. This is your all-access pass to everything you need to know to design, produce, and inspire your next event. Remember to subscribe to the podcast so you too can get backstage.